Yo, what is good, my G? Welcome in. My name is Victor Vigil. I have been practicing semen retention for over 800 days to this point, just a bit over 2 years now. And I want to give you all of the sauce of some of the unseen things in this realm. Kind of what is the science behind this? What is some more of the mystical stuff? And where's actually a good approach that's going to help you to be successful on your journey to actually successfully retaining your seed. So buckle in, we got a saucy one for you guys on this video. It's going to be a little bit more of my story with this one. And so this all started for me when I was 16 years old. Unfortunately, a lot of guys are giving into lust, learning about it and finding out about it when they're 8, 9, 10, unfortunately in this day and age. So I was a bit more fortunate in that regard that I got to start this a little bit later. But it's also obviously very unfortunate that I gave in to lust and finding out about this at 16 years old, having my first beautiful Christian girlfriend, and then obviously everything just collapses after that. My family finding out, just craziness. I lose a lot of respect from people in my life. I lose so much respect for myself, and this is really what starts that, the nice guy Nathan downfall and the pitfall with so much amounts of shame in my life. So I really don't know what to do about this. I'm trying to figure this out with willpower. I'm trying to figure out how can I use covenant eyes? How can I use all of these blockers? How can I muster the strength to actually overcome this? And there was just no way that I could, because there's just immense amounts of shame that I felt myself and from society and from people around me. And that's what just cultivated the nice guy syndrome, but it's also I don't know where I was going with that. Anyways, so I'm trying to figure this out, and I'm stuck in this nice guy syndrome. I'm stuck in this. I can't even go more than a few days. I mean, I'm literally addicted to this stuff like drugs, like hard drugs, because porn is literally worse than hard drugs, right? And so I'm trying to figure out this journey, and I all throughout the rest of high school, I can't figure this out. I go into college and I get to meet some really cool guys, and they invited me to join this group called Exodus 90. This is a group of guys for 90 days. Essentially, for Lent, what we would do is we would do all of these crazy spiritual disciplines, but some of the underlying themes of it was to help men to get away from pornography and from masturbation. And this was pretty radical. It's pretty revolutionary. So it's a very Catholic organization, and the Catholic priest at my school started this, but it became Catholic, Orthodox, and myself being raised a Protestant, and we're just all practicing this. We're all trying to overcome lust, and we're all doing these spiritual disciplines. So we're very, very unusual, just very serious men about this. It was really cool, a great fraternity of men who are practicing semen retention, who are practicing spiritual disciplines. Some of the crazy stuff that we did. I mean, this literally made us look like we were insane. Like, people would just be like staring at us like deer in headlights whenever we would tell them what Exodus 90 actually was. People would think we are literally crazy. And I've only taken it up a notch since then. Multiple notches anyways. But some of the stuff we would do, we had to pray for a minimum of 20 minutes every single day. We had to take a cold shower every single day. No snacking between meals. No desserts, no sweet drinks, no video games, no TV. You could do video games or TV if you came together with a community event of guys, which is really cool because it encouraged the community bonding with the groups. But it's still very rigorous. We had to do physical training, and we had to fast twice a week, and a handful of other oddball things. And if you wanted to add anything else, you could add whatever you wanted to that list. But you can see how this can start to become a bit legalistic, in the sense that it becomes rule following, it becomes a list. And so I was absolutely so thankful for Exodus. Not only did it help me just have so much more appreciation for life and feel like there was actually hope for me to overcome this struggle, my parents just noticed how much of a different person I was after Exodus 90, and the zeal that I had for God and the joy and gratitude I had for my existence and for living. And then also just, how honorable of a man I was becoming on this journey. But something that I really noticed myself struggling with, and a lot of other guys in this community struggled with, is it was a 90-day program for the whole of Lent, right? Of Protestant, Catholic, and Orthodox guys. We're all joining into this together, doing this crazy spiritual discipline fast and retention for 90 days. But that would, for almost every single guy, lead to just an insane burnout afterwards. So like the very last week or two, these guys would just start giving out on everything, right? Giving out on all the spiritual disciplines and crashing and just starting to give back into insane amounts of hedonism, almost like way worse, right? And I would notice that I could be incredibly disciplined for the entire 90 days until that very last week or the week after when everything was finished. And I would just binge like a madman. And I never understood why this was the case. I could not understand why I could have such intense motivation while the program was going, but afterwards I would just lose the continence. I would lose my streak. You guys will come to find out I'm not super huge on the streak keeping. I think it is somewhat important when you're first making your way out of the rut, but at a certain point it becomes a lot less about the streak and a lot more about your identity. We'll get into that a lot more later. So I kind of move on to this program, and I'm like, golly, I'm getting pretty good at these spiritual disciplines. I'm best at the ones that I've been doing for a long time. So I'd been doing cold showers. I had been weight training since I was in high school, so that was pretty natural to me. I knew how to fast reasonably well because I was a bodybuilder, and the reason that I even got into this in the first place was because I did a cut down to like 8% body fat. I was a freak in college, bro. I was a genuine freak. So I did this major cut, and I was like, I'll join this Exodus group because it'll go hand in hand with my cut. And so I'll start up the fasting. Why not? And ended up falling in love with it. But I'm just like, dude, I don't understand what's going on, because no amount of willpower, no amount of blockers, no amount of apps, none of these, not even like meditative prayer or meditation. You should not be afraid of that word. It's just contemplation and emptying your mind. None of these things actually helped me to find a way out of this. And this led to me like really wondering if I was ever actually going to be able to find a way out of this, if I could ever actually make my way out of this struggle. And so I go through Exodus, and I eventually start leading. I start leading some of these groups, and there's hundreds of guys, like multiple hundreds of guys on our campus that are actually practicing Exodus 90. So this is like a big movement that my mentor, Father Nick, a Catholic priest, started on our small campus, our college campus. So really impressive stuff that they're doing. But I came to this realization, like there's got to be something outside of this. There's got to be another way around this, because I've seen older men, I've seen men online who are going through life for decades in total freedom from lust without even breaking a sweat over this. And so it's like, there's got to be a way out of this. There's got to be some hope for me. Please, God, help me. I don't want to spend every single urge, every single moment trying to pray and crying out to God, begging him and trying to read a few scriptures in those last moments, which is not going to work. Honestly, those prayers mock God, because we need to be doing the work outside of that. We have spiritual authority. We need to do the work to understand our triggers and to set up our environment to prevent those situations. But I was like, I can't live in these insatiable urges in the moment and just give in for the rest of my life. Like, I will never get to meet the feminine, godly women that I want to marry someday if I don't actually overcome this and successfully retain my seed. So I'm trying to figure this out. I'm just going bonkers. And I get to the end of my college, and God ends up showing me that he doesn't want me to pursue the path that I had been pursuing. My degree as a teacher. I was going to be a middle school social studies teacher. And I get to student teaching all the way at the end of college. And I'm like, this is just not for me. This is not going to be it. I am not a fan of this. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I think God has something else for me. I could feel him just quietly nudging me towards something else in my life. And this was a really dark time in my life, because I'd spent years in the making pursuing this degree. And a lot of people thought that I was going to be really good at this stuff, like good at leading, good at speaking, good at presenting. And then all of a sudden, just like my entire life collapses around me, and I graduate college, and I'm not going to use this degree, and I'm left jobless. I don't know what I'm going to do, and my parents are hounding my rear end to get myself figured out, to try to do something. So I pick up a job working as just a delivery driver. I'm like, I just need something. I need some quick cash to live. And this is the founding time when I really started doing the social media, really started doing this business side of things, and now hoping that I can inspire the next generation of men to become retainers, to become initiated men who actually take on challenges and who actually take accountability and who retain successfully. So my dog is going crazy. Buddy! We'll see if that... Nope, it did not do anything to distract him. I'll see after if I can hear the dog in this footage. But in reality, who really cares? So where was I? So I'm trying to figure out my life, dude. My life is kind of thrown into the gutter. And afterwards, after college, dude, I was like, oh shoot, real world is hitting me in the face. The real world is here. And I kind of just like lose everybody around me. Like everybody was from all around the world, all of the people I knew in college. And now God is leading me through the kind of this desert isolation period. And so the entirety essentially of 2025, I spent genuinely living like a monk, living in almost total isolation from the world, going to church and going to work and doing social media and mentoring a few and coaching a few young men. And then the rest of my time was literally trying to figure this stuff out. And just occasionally very occasionally meeting with a handful of mentors and friends. This was a very dark time in my life, but what it led to, that season of isolation, actually led to the point in my life where I could finally begin to hear my own thoughts. I could finally sit in the silence, no longer having to be a Protestant prayer or having to beg God for everything, trying to thank him for everything and trying to ask him for everything, but just sitting in the presence, in the stillness, in the solitude, in the moments with God, and learning to distinguish between his voice, between the enemy's voice, and even the voice in my own head. And that was where I really started to be able to discern where these urges were coming from, and realizing that they were all feeding off of a lot of emotional dysregulation. I had a lot of emotional dysregulation. And you realize that a lot of your urges are going to show up in the moments where you're feeling really stressed out, when you're feeling really tired, when you're feeling really anxious, when you're feeling really lonely. And those are the moments that lust is going to capitalize on the most. And so you have to be hyper vigilant in those times. And it's a lot less about just trying to avoid the sex, about trying to avoid the pornography. And it's a lot more about becoming a self-contained, masculine, authentic man. Learning to be emotionally regulated. And after spending thousands of hours studying neuroscience and psychology behind this stuff, learning that those triggers are feeding very much on your trauma. It's feeding very much on your trauma and how you were raised as a kid. It feeds on your trauma because for a lot of us guys who struggle with lust, we learned to become the emotional thermostat of the house. We learned to read the temperature of the room whenever there was dysfunction in the home, whenever mom and dad were fighting and things are just way out of hand. There's no good conflict resolution. Maybe your father is passive and maybe your mother wears the pants. And Lust is feeding off of the mother and the father wounds. And these emotional triggers that I had behind all of these urges were just feeding off of these wounds. And so when I finally became aware of these things, that's when I finally became able to overcome this struggle. And it was no longer just trying to suppress these urges, trying to deny them, to shove them under the rug. Because what happens when you try to deny desire, when you try to deny your libido, which is God-given, it's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It becomes exhausting, and the momentum piles up until it shoots back up to the surface, and the compulsion is worse than it ever was before. So the key is not to suppress your urges, is not to deny them, but it's actually to meet yourself with understanding. And in those moments, you start to realize that a lot of this is just feeding off of the emotions that I was never allowed to feel. This is just a little boy inside of me that's crying out for help, because his father never showed him how to be emotionally regulated and how to be a rock, how to be a mountain, how to be immovable, and had a mother who was disrespectful towards him. And so he clammed up for the rest of their marriage. And she took out all of her stress on you and all of the other children. And you started to become her emotional husband. And you have a distorted lens of masculinity. You begin to become a nice guy. You start to see your father as a bad person. You start to see everything as one-sided, as your dad is a problem. And you start to see masculinity as bad, as masculinity is toxic. And this starts to become the lens through which you see the world. Now, I call this the nice guy Nathan, because I'm Victor Vigil III. So as a young man, I got called by my middle name, Nathaniel. I went for Nathan for short at home, in the home. And this was the way that my family knew me, because my grandfather and my father were both Victor. And so I'm like, dude, I have a totally distorted view of masculinity. I didn't actually understand what it was like to be an initiated, ascended man. I didn't understand what it was actually like to lead. I never understood what it was like to be emotionally contained. I never understood that it was okay to express desire authentically. I never understood that it was okay for a man to embrace masculine authority. Not dominance in the sense that you are rude or brutal or harmful to women, but in the sense that you can hold boundaries, that you can say no to a woman, that you can be contained, stoic in a sense, and grounded and submitted to the Lord, because you're more submitted to God than you are to a woman. You care more about your purpose. You care more about God. You care more about your mission. And that's what builds a masculine frame. That's what builds authentic masculinity. And when you can learn to self-regulate, when you can learn to understand and to meet that little boy that's arising in those urges, stop trying to suppress them. The suppression, the neuroscience shows that it just makes it worse. It's like trying to think of a pink elephant. It never is going to work. You're just going to start thinking about it more, because it brings it to the front of your mind. And the key is genuinely not to try to suppress your urges. It's to meet that little boy with understanding, and to thank him, and to forgive him, and to release him from his responsibility in your life, and to take back authority, to take back masculine authority, to take back belief in yourself, and building your code, building your standard that you will live by under God, and stepping into the masculine authority that God has prepared for you. Because that is what's actually going to cultivate masculine frame. That's what's going to cultivate aura. That's what's going to cultivate the confidence, that glow that people talk about on semen retention, to get away from a lot of the mysticism and to give you more evidence of it. It's just congruence between what you say you're going to do and what you actually do. Because a lot of guys say they believe it's wrong to give in to lust, but then on the dark, lonely evenings, giving in, right? And so that congruence, that's what makes you magnetic. That's what makes you confident, is you are just keeping your word to yourself. And that's what's going to build your self-respect. And that's what's actually going to attract a feminine, godly woman. Not these manipulation tactics, not these little body posture tactics where you walk like this and you say a certain pickup line. None of that stuff is going to work. And this is where the process of identity transformation actually starts to take place. When you begin to retrain your nervous system to sit in the midst of those urges and to breathe through them, because the breathing is what re-engages your prefrontal cortex and shuts down the limbic system, to actually re-engage your executive function, to re-engage your decision making, to bring back the CEO of your mind, to actually have the ability to say no to the urges, and then to understand some of the emotional triggers behind them, and to name it out loud and say, you know what, this is just lust showing up. It's not who I am. And separating yourself from those actual feelings of lust. Saying, you know what, this is evidence, this is data, and we're going to improve. And even having that same mindset if you do relapse, where you can have the audacity to say, I'm not going to condemn myself. I'm not going to shame myself. I have the audacity to know that I am a chosen man of God. That this is just evidence, this is data, this is an understanding of where we are at, but this does not define who I am. This is not my identity. You cannot allow this to become an identity statement about who you are. Because when you allow lust, when you allow the enemy to create an identity centered around being the struggler in your life, that is when it will keep you locked in chains that you chained yourself up to. That the devil handed you those chains and gave them to you, and you locked yourself up and tossed away the key. You cannot step into the identity of the struggler. You need to take on the identity of the conqueror. You need to begin to see yourself as the conqueror, as a man of God. It says in 2 Corinthians 5:21, it says, God made him who had no sin to be sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. You have an option today to take on that identity. So begin giving yourself identity statements. Give yourself identity statements saying, I'm becoming this. I'm becoming set free. I'm becoming a conqueror. I'm becoming transformed and renewed in Christ. Lust no longer defines me. And give yourself some freaking evidence of that, bro. And believe in yourself for once in your life. Tell yourself that you are the stuff, even if you don't believe it yet. The first time I started stepping into this conqueror identity, I almost threw up because it felt so much like sin to me to believe in myself. That was what my nervous system was trained into me as a young man. I was never told by anybody that I was enough, just as I am, just as a son of God. You must begin to step into that identity and allow yourself to believe that you are a conqueror through Christ and through his finished work on the cross. Stop putting him up on the cross. Stop begging him for forgiveness. Stop praying and reading scriptures in last moments. Set yourself up, program your environment, and program your nervous system by giving yourself the identity of the conqueror. Because the only way to actually live in congruence with a lifestyle of freedom is to believe you are deserving of that. Not by anything that we've done, but what Christ did for us on Calvary. So you need to step into that identity. You need to begin to step into that, even if you don't believe it yet. Create those identity statements and remind yourself daily. Keep it daily on your tongue. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And then give yourself evidence of it. Resisting the urge. 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months, 9 months, a year. Even if you relapse, remind yourself this does not define who you are. And continue to rise. The righteous man falls 7 times and rise again. He doesn't take on the shame identity that the devil wants you to take of the struggler. Take on the identity of the conqueror in Christ. I didn't mean to turn this into a sermon, but this is the reality. If you actually want to overcome lust, if you actually want to step into freedom, if you want to step into the royal priesthood that God has laid before us, it means you need to dominate your desire, that you need to become master over it, empowered by the Holy Spirit through the resurrection power of Christ and through sonship to the Father. I hope this has been a blessing for you guys. I think this one was an absolute banger. Let me know where you guys are at in your streak if you've made it this far. Drop a comment down below if you have any questions. I love to reach out and help people who actually have good questions on this journey. If you ask the right questions, that'll lead you to the right answers. So ask good questions, and I might just respond to your comment, but I hope this has been a blessing to you. Memento mori. Remember that you could die. We'll see you guys on the next one.